Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting of Gedling Borough Council Planning Committee. Make the usual announcements about webcasting notice that the meeting is being live streamed, Council's YouTube channel, etc., etc. So be aware of the fact that you are being recorded and broadcasted. However, as usual, they're having problems with the cameras and whatnot, so they won't be, usually when you speak, the cameras focus on you, so your mugshot appears on the screen. Well, that won't happen. All you'll see is the screen like that. Sorry if, people like having their mugshot on the screen, but you're going to have to be denied that this time. I would like to say that Mike Avery and Sarah Fires are both affected by the COVID pandemic, so they are absent tonight. And we have Kevin Cartwright, the Principal Planning Officer at the end there, who's standing in for Mike Avery, and Sarah Pregon. We welcome the return of Sarah, we haven't seen for a while. And we also have Alison Gibson with us, Planning Policy Manager, who will be going through the Authority Monitoring Report, which is item 10 on your agenda, but I'm moving it up to item 1 on the agenda so that Alison can do her presentation and then get off rather than having to wait till all these other applications are gone through. So we'll start off with apologies for absence and substitutions. Please, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, apologies from Councillor Rachel Ellis and Councillor Miller. No substitutions, unfortunately. They've both been indisposed today, so not been possible to organise substitutes.
Thank you. And Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just Councillor Chris Barnfather is just running late due to an incident on Trent Bridge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of January, which you'll find on pages 5 to 9 on your agenda papers. Would anybody like to move that as being a correct record of the meeting on the 12th of January 2022? Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Anybody like to second that? Thank you. All those in favour, please show. And again, stand abstentions, that is passed. Planning Committee protocol, this is on page 11 till 13. I guess you've all read and understood that. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. I will declare a collective non-pecuniary interest on agenda item 4, which is application 20/0189, land at Teal Close, because Gedling Borough Council owns some of the land on that site. Right, so we go on to the position statement on the local planning policies, which was agenda item. Sorry, the authority monitoring report, not the position statement. So you'll find that on page 43, and as it states there, the National Planning Practice Guidance states that local planning authorities must publish information at least annually. That shows progress with local plan preparation and reports any activity relating to the duty to cooperate, and shows how the implementation of policies in the local plan is progressing. So I'll hand you over to Alison Gibson, who will clarify this report for you. And Kevin will be showing the slides. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So In terms of a quick introduction to the Authority Monitoring Report for April 2020 to March 2021, just to make you aware that this report has already been noted by Cabinet and it is here for your information. As our Chair's already mentioned, Regulation 34 of the Town and Country Planning Regs requires local planning authorities to produce an annual monitoring report. Although I would note that the first report that I produced was back in 2004. In terms of national planning policy practice guidance, we do need to publish these at least annually, and we need to show progress on local plan preparation, activity with respect to duty to cooperate, and show how we're implementing our local plan policies. So in terms of key updates for 2021, I can confirm that we have made good progress with the preparation of the Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan. We went out for a growth options consultation in the summer of 2020 and also a follow-up consultation in the spring of 2021. In addition, joint evidence is ongoing and is being prepared. We continue to fulfil our duty to cooperate with neighbouring authorities. And I can confirm that all policies in the neighbourhood plans for Burton Joyce, Calverton, Papwick and Limby are being implemented. We also published a low carbon planning guidance in May 2021. So moving on to section 5 of the AMR, this is where we monitor the implementation of the local plan against the monitoring indicators. And these are set out in our Greater Nottingham Plan and the Gedling Borough Local Plan. The detailed monitoring information that we collect on this annual basis includes climate change and flood risk and water management data. So we monitor renewable energy schemes, we look at energy use by type and CO2 emissions. We look at the number of planning permissions implemented against Environment Agency and lead local flood advice. And I'm pleased to confirm that none of these have been granted since 2011. In terms of environmental protection, we monitor the number of planning applications approved against the advice of our council scientific officer. We also monitor coal authority advice and the health and safety executive advice. Again, 0 applications have been granted against this advice. In terms of Greenbelt, we look at the percentage of planning permissions that have been made contrary to our local plan policies. We look at the number of homes for rural workers, and we look at the location of area land removed from the Greenbelt. And I'm pleased to confirm that 73% of our borough is Greenbelt land. In terms of the natural environment, we monitor our SSSI at Limby, and we do look at the progression of the special protection area for Sherwood Forest. In terms of open space and recreational facilities, we include monitoring of our Green Flag awarded open spaces, and we now have 4 Green Flag awarded parks in Gedling, including for the first time in 2020 the inclusion of Bestwood Country Park. We also look at the net change to country parks and the number of applications received which are related to tourist-related accommodation. In terms of the historic environment, we monitor the number of heritage assets by type and area and the number at risk. And for your information, we do have our non-designated heritage assets list now updated and available on the website. In terms of design, we monitor density of new developments, and we also monitor the number of new homes built on residential garden land. In terms of homes, there's a whole host of monitoring indicators here. We look at housing completions, we look at planning progress on strategic sites and also smaller sites. We look at our 5-year land supply, and we encouragingly have a 6.32 years supply. We also look at housing completions on previously developed land and windfall sites. In terms of employment, we monitor progress on strategic and allocated employment land, and we look at the supply and availability of employment land by type and area. In terms of retail and community facilities, we monitor retail need. We look at health and diversity of uses of local centres. We look at the proportion of vacant units and the amount of office floor space. We also look at the amount of retail floor space approved outside local centres. In terms of transport, we monitor the percentage of planning permissions in accordance with our parking standards. We look at the number of park and ride facilities granted, and we have been monitoring the progress on the GAR. And one interesting statistic that I drew from the 2020 assessments was that we did see a huge increase in cyclists, which actually coincided with the first COVID lockdown. And the growth in cycling grew from 4.4% in 2019 to 45.7% in 2020. That has since then dipped down again, though. And finally, in terms of infrastructure and developer contributions, we monitor the implementation of individual schemes which are listed in our infrastructure delivery plan. So thank you, Chair, and shall I open it for questions?
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody got any questions for Alison? Councillor Lawrence?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to start by saying what a wealth of information there is, and to congratulate the department for producing it. I've just got one query. Page 61, Table 12, Local Wildlife Sites. I'm just wondering how these actually change, because we've got, in 2018, there were actually 87 that went down to 86, the next year to 85, the year after, and last spring they were down to 82. I'm just wondering if you have an explanation as to why that's happened. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Yes, in terms of the number of sites, that's actually monitored by the Nottinghamshire Biological and Geological Record Centre, which are based at Woollerton Park. And effectively, there are cases where a local wildlife site may change in area due to adjoining development that could have occurred. Or different management practices on the land. But effectively, we received this data from Woollerton Hall.
Councillor Ellis?
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank Alison for this report. It's a very comprehensive and thorough piece of work, and echo what Councillor Lawrence said, that it's a wealth of information. I think.
Councillor Parr?
Yeah. Sorry, I was saying. Yeah, I think sometimes at a committee we can get lost in individual applications. So I think it's really useful to take a step back and reflect on the overall strategy. I think there's a couple of things that leapt out to me. One, the growth in population. By 2030, population of Gedling will have increased by 7,000, or by 6%, and by 2040 will have increased by nearly 12,000, or 10%, which is obviously a significant increase. And I noticed on page 16 the green belt reduction when the local planning document was agreed, which was agreed unanimously by the council. It released green belt land, released 2% reduced from 75 to 73%. And it's interesting when you look at Mr. Avery's office, he's got a massive map on his wall which shows all of Gedling, and it's mostly green belt. I did look at the government statistics on this, and interestingly, so Gedling is 73% green belt. The UK as a whole is 12.4%. I know it's not necessarily comparable, but we're the highest level of green belt in the county. So I know there are some people trying to put the message out that the council's building on the green belt, and it's just not true. It's a very limited building to meet the needs. And as Alison pointed out, the 5-year housing supply meets this. I also thought it was interesting on page 38 of the report itself, the growth in house prices. from March 2011, average house price of just over 130,000. By March 2021, it was over 213,000, which is a £82,000 increase, a 63% increase in a decade when we've not had any great growth in wages. And I think it shows the failure of government policy to boost demand and not meet supply. And it sort of reinforces our view as a council that we need to put more emphasis on seeing affordable housing. But I said, they're just things that leapt out to me, and I just thank Alison for the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we make sure we stick to planning rather than politics, please, Councillor Ellis? Councillor
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Alison, for another great report. It must be about the last 10 years you've been doing this, so you know the way now. What I would like to know, some in the rural villages, we've got sort of derelict old farm buildings and garages and farm stables just sitting there. Is there any encouragement from the planning department to try and bring these properties into use? Because they sometimes bring the village down a little bit, and it makes sense. It wouldn't make sense if we could bring them onto the open market, because there's some nice villages and they're just spoiling some of the villages. They're just letting them just stand there empty for years and just rotting away. Is there anything we can do about that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. What I would say is that we do have an empty homes officer. So if you have some specific cases in mind, perhaps we could draw those to her attention. Thank you.
Councillor Barnfather.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Apologies for being late. I'm afraid Trent Bridge is closed. Some police incident there. I had to do a deviated route, so my apologies. And thank you for reminding Councillor Ellis that this is an apolitical planning committee rather than a party political broadcast on behalf of the Labour group. But I'm not quite sure how in one sentence you can say it's not true and then talk about limited building. Either it's not happening or it's happening in a limited sense. Just a clarification, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just thanks again for the report, and just really to ask a question around Table 13, page 61. It talks about local wildlife sites under positive management. Can you give an explanation as to what positive management is and why we have seen such a deterioration in that positive management since 2011-12 to up to the most recent figures, which is 2018 to 2019? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, to be fair, I'm not sure actually specifically what positive management means. I would have to get back to you on that one. But I would imagine that it is specific local wildlife sites that may require certain management, but it very much depends on what the wildlife site is. I don't know if there is more explanation in the report where we talk about, I suppose, Gedling Borough Council, we manage wildlife sites, and it very much depends on whether it's a woodland or it's an area of open water. So I'm not actually sure the strict criteria of positive management, but I could get back to you on that one.
That'd be wonderful, yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, yeah.
Can I just ask a slight further point on that, just on that side of it? Would this report therefore be reflecting Gedling Borough's own managed sites, or is that, as in Gedling Borough Council's managed sites, or is that Gedling Borough, as in the wider borough itself, therefore managed by the likes of the Wildlife Trust and potentially other authorities, or is this specifically a Gedling Borough Council report? Thank you.
No, it goes much wider than Gedling Borough Council owned sites. So yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Are there any more questions for Alison before she goes? No? Okay, thank you, Alison. I'd just like to reiterate what's already been said. Thank you very much for presenting this report, and thank you very much for all the work that has gone into it from Planning Policy Department and all the rest of you who seem to be more of the background crew, that we know you do a hell of a lot of work with very few staff, and you should be congratulated for this report. It's an excellent piece of work. Thank you very much. Okay. If we can now go on to agenda item 4, which is application number 2020/0189, land at Teal Close, Netherfield, which you'll find on page 16 of your agenda papers, which is the proposed modification of Section 106 agreement in relation to planning permission regarding bus service, and I think it's also about the school as well. And I'll ask Kevin to introduce this and elaborate on the application. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Just by way of an update, we've received further representations from the City Council in which they've revised their payback timeframe request to 8 years from first payment and not as 10 years as I outlined in the report. The basis of this request is that the first 3 payments are now due and they will be paid at the same time, and this would effectively give the City Council less time to use this money. The City Council has also requested that the repayment period of the travel pass contribution is also extended from 5 to 8 years. However, this request did not form part of the deed of variation and has not been considered by officers, and you will note that it's not in the description of the proposed modification. As such, I would say that this does not form part of this application, is not for consideration. So that's just really a verbal update. So members will recall the development that is taking place on Teal Close. The committee has considered a number of applications, and work is progressing on the school. The industrial and commercial units are constructed and a number of dwellings are already built in phase 1. That's the current approved layout that we have for the 2 phases. That's phase 1, which is under construction, and that's phase 2. The idea is there would be a bus service that would go into the site. It's likely that there would be a bus stop. That's the Collick Loop Road, so that was Magenta Way. There would likely to be a bus stop somewhere around the local centre on Magenta Way, and it's also envisaged there'd probably not be another bus stop actually within phase 2. So the idea is the bus would go along Magenta Way into phase 2 and then back out again. Clearly the roads aren't actually into phase 2 at the moment because it's not actually started construction, so it's likely there will be a little bit of time before the infrastructure is actually in place to allow the buses to enter the site, hence the request for the changes to the delivery of the actual bus service. So the application before you this evening is to vary the Section 106 agreement in relation to a number of matters which are listed in the report at 4.1. These include the variation of the timeframe for the delivery of the school to the County Council, bringing that to the 31st of May of this year, varying the timescale of the CityLink contribution to the City Council from 5 to 8 years. As I say, that's a verbal update. It will be 10 in your report, but they are now actually requesting it to be 8. And also changing the name of the service to which the bus service that it relates. Varying the timescale of the bus service contribution to the County Council from 5 to 8, and also removing the specific reference to the name service in that instance. So going back, in relation to the school, the revised timeline ensures that the delivery of the school by the planned school opening in autumn 2022, which the County Council as Education Authority are content with that and supportive. In relation to the County Council request to extend the bus service payment from 5 to 8 years, this is considered reasonable as the County Council received its first payment back in 2019, and without the extended time frame, the County Council would have to spend or commit to spend the contributions by July 2024, 5 years from the first payment back in July 2019, so that would be somewhat limiting. The request of the modifications by the City Council from 5 to 8 years is not really considered reasonable from our perspective, in so much that the City Council has yet to receive any payments. So it's a different scenario than that of the County Council, who received their first payment back in 2019. So whilst noting the City Council's request, and noting specifically that they would receive 3 of their 4 instalments at the same time, they would still be left with the same, at the same time, with the timescale left unchanged at 5 years, they would still have the same time frame as the County Council. It should also be borne in mind that the Section 106 agreement requires that the contributions are either spent or committed to be spent within these timeframes. As such, this is considered to provide a degree of flexibility and would not put either the City or the County Council under undue pressure or risk. In summary, at 9.2 in the report, This deed of variation would ensure the delivery of the school in line with the Education Authority's requirements. It would extend the County Council's timescale for expenditure or committed expenditure of the bus service contribution from 5 to 8 years, as they received their first payment back in 2019, and would also vary the indexation period applicable to the transport contributions payable to the City Council. The time frame for the City Council would remain unchanged at 5 years and would then mirror that of the County Council. The recommendation is that the variation is approved in relation to delivery of the school and the transport contributions as set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So there you have it on page 16, proposal, modification of section 106 agreement, etc., etc. Would anybody like to move that proposal? Thank you. And second? Thank you. Would anybody like to speak to it? Nope. I'm quite content that I move straight to the vote. The recommendation you'll find on page 23 that members approve the variation of the section 106 agreement, etc., etc. Can I see all those in favour, please? And again, stand abstentions. Thank you. That is carried. So now we go on to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item 5, which you'll find on page 26, which is a breach of planning control, land at 48 Avondale Road, Carlton. Kevin, would you like to introduce this one for me?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the application relates to 48 Avondale Road, Carlton. There's the application site. A side extension was granted planning permission back in 2003. This was constructed, and we've recently received a complaint that there's been a dormer window inserted into the side elevation of this extension facing Trentdale Road. So there's the application premises, there's the two-storey extension that's been built on the side. And there we've got the dormer that's been inserted into the two-storey extension. The owner was requested to insert obscure glazing and non-opening windows in order to make it permitted development and also ensure that there's no overlooking and loss of privacy. Unfortunately, these remedial works have not been undertaken. The recommendation, therefore, is to seek authorisation to take the necessary enforcement action to ensure that the window is fitted with obscure glazing and non-opening unless parts of the window are more than 1.7 from the floor level in which it serves. So as you can see from the photographs, that's the relationship with the property is directly open over the road, so there's sort of direct overlooking into the first floor windows on Trentdale. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. So we have a breach of planning control. Would anybody like to move that?
Move it.
And second? Okay. Anybody like to speak to that? Councillor Lawrence.
Just to say that it is very disappointing when this sort of thing happens, but we have no option but to try and bring it into a situation whereby it is as covered by our particular policies. So it's say disappointing, but there you go.
Does anybody else like to speak on this? Nope. Quite content that I move to the vote. You find the recommendation on page 30 that the head of development and place be authorised to take all necessary enforcement action, etc., as you can read in the paragraph there. All those in favour, please show. And against, and abstentions. That is carried. Thank you very much. We now go on to agenda item 6, which is support the interpretation of policies LPD 30 and LPD 14, which I'll ask Kevin to explain that further. It's a bit technical.
Thank you, Chair. Recent planning decisions have highlighted the need for the Council to be consistent in its interpretation and application of LPD 13 and 14. These two policies are considered to be in conformity with the National Planning Policy Framework, and the issue is of their interpretation, which relates to the supporting text. Both policies relate to the green belt and deal with extensions to existing buildings and replacement buildings respectively. They conform to the NPPF paragraph 149, but add more detail in that both set a threshold to clarify that extensions or replacement buildings of more than 50% increase in floor area would result in a disproportionate addition to the original building or a replacement dwelling that is materially larger than the one it replaces. Just got the text of the two policies there if we need to refer to them. The supporting text of LPD 13 and LPD 14 is at paragraph 6.3.3 and 6.4.6 of the local planning document, respectively. These two paragraphs include guidance on the calculation of the floor space of the original building. This guidance includes outbuildings within 5 metres of the original building to be taken into account in the floor space calculations, regardless of whether or not the outbuilding is part of the original building or not. This creates an anomaly in that, out of context, more recent outbuildings constructed under permitted development rights could also be taken as counting towards this floor space figure. This effectively circumvents the intent of both policy LPD 13 and 14 and is contrary to the guidance contained in the NPPF, as in such cases the resultant extension may well result in a disproportionate addition or replacement building materially larger than the one it replaces. The recent decisions referred to in the report highlight the need for the Council to be consistent in its interpretation of LPD 13 and 14 in order to conform with the NPPF. The appendix clarifies the interpretation of the intent of policy LPD 13 and 14 by clearly stating that only original outbuildings constructed at the same time as the original building or outbuildings in existence at the 1st of July 1948 would count towards the existing floor space. I recommend that the Planning Committee support the interpretation of policies LPD 13 and 14 in accordance with the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would anybody like to ask Kevin, any questions, any clarification on that? No? You're quite happy? Okay, if anybody thinks of anything, just drop him an email. Okay, thank you for that, Kevin. We'll move on. Next item on the agenda is...
Chair, there was a recommendation. We haven't actually voted on it, have we?
What's that?
Well, the recommendation on page 31. Been moved and seconded, but we haven't voted on it.
Okay, sorry, you want to... Okay, we'll take a vote on that recommendation. All those in favour, please show. I apologise for overlooking that. Thank you very much. And those against and abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. That's what I need. Agenda item 7, Ramper Covert Wood, Mansfield Road, Arnold. They put in for a change to natural burial ground. Their appeal against that's been dismissed. I don't think we ought to. You don't need to say anything about that, Kevin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, that was, there's again been multiple applications on that particular site. The vast majority have been the subject of appeals and dismissed. This was the last in that particular batch of applications. The actual use of the land as a burial ground, pet burial ground, wasn't by definition inappropriate. The issue arose from the fact that it was an unsafe access off the A60, which is quite a highly trafficked and fairly sensitive road. The proposal didn't include any highway improvements, so the inspector agreed with our conclusions that the absence of a safe access was actually, a ground for refusal, and that was upheld at appeal. The inspector didn't, however, sort of share our concerns in relation to the potential impact that the burial ground would have on the protected trees, because there is a tree preservation order on the site as well. The inspector was comfortable that there will be minimal impact on the trees due to the actual nature of the burial plots being reasonably low key and could be located in appropriate locations on the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 8. 131 Coronation Walk, Gedling, high fence. They appealed against that. Their appeal has been dismissed. No, nothing to say on that.
Yeah, again, Chair, it was a reasonably straightforward application. This was just if I recall, it was just a 2-metre high, close bordered fence located at the back edge of the footpath in a sort of prominent location in the street scene. It was a straight refusal from our perspective due to the impact on the character and appearance of the area, and the inspector seemed to share that opinion.
Okay, agenda item 9, which is 2 Stewart and Close. Another fence-related application. This time the applicant's appeal was allowed, which is, we don't usually lose many of these.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this one, I think it was a borderline decision at the time, but we did feel it was quite an imposing feature in the street scene. However, the inspector didn't share our concerns, and he did also cite similar structures in the vicinity which he felt were very similar to this proposal, and therefore he deemed the impact to be minimal and granted consent. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Future planning applications, page 111. Any comments, questions? Agenda item 12, planning delegation panel action sheets from pages 113 to page 129. Any comments and questions on that? Nope. Okay, well, that's agenda item 13. Any other items the chair considers urgent? I don't have any. So all it leaves for me to do is thank you all very much for attending, and wish you all a safe journey home. And do stay COVID-free till next month. Thank you very much.